हाँ जी, स्क्रीन नजर आ रही है आपको?
यस सर।
So we will continue with the same topic which we started last time, that is river mechanics. So last time we were discussing the various features in a floodplain, and one of the feature which is very visible in the floodplains is the levees. So how the levees are formed, that is formation of a levee, we will start discussing with this feature, and then other features of the floodplain. So levees, there are two types. One are the natural levees, and the other are the man-made or artificial levees, or they are you can also call them embankments. So here you see an example of a man-made levee in New Orleans in USA, and before the Katrina, uh, you see the levees were not damaged, but after the Katrina hurricane, there was breach in the levee, and you can see in the next photograph that the breaching of this man-made levee resulted in the flooding of the adjacent areas of New Orleans. So the red circle you see is the breach in the man-made levee, and due to that, the inundation in the surrounding area, you can see the area is inundated by the flood water. So coming to the natural levees, which are formed naturally, so we can define them that these are the mounds of alluvium, which is the material which is formed by the running water, and it keeps on depositing the various layers uh, by the various floods in the different years. And when these layers one by one they are deposited, so natural levees they are formed. So each time the river floods, they bring a lot of alluvium, that is the sediments which are deposited in the floodplains, and the bed and the floodplains they keep on increasing. So in the diagram you see the four steps. The original floodplain, when there was no deposition, only you can see water in it. But after flooding, you see there is rise in the riverbed, and also it deposits the sediments on either of its banks in the within the floodplains. As the flood recedes, the water goes back into the channel, but the sediments, due to the decrease in velocity, they settle down or they are deposited on the floodplains. And year by year, when the river is in flooding stage, so each time a fresh layer will be deposited, and in this way, with the passage of time, there will be sufficient accumulation of this alluvium material, and the bed and the flood plains they will be having increase each year. So this is very visible in river Indus as well, especially in the Sindh province. If you see with the number of years, its bed has increased, and also it has deposited alluvium in the floodplains, and now it resembles like a hanging river. If you see, it is higher than the adjacent area. So it looks that it is lifted up because due to the deposition of this alluvium on the bed and on the floodplains, And if you compare with the adjacent area, you will see this area higher than the adjacent area. So this is the way how these natural levees they are formed. So this is one type of levees, the natural levees, which is a natural phenomenon, and each year with the deposition of layers of sediments, this keep on increasing and spreading, and the levees they are formed. So this you can see a real photograph of a natural levee. So you can see that the sediments they have deposited in the floodplains and natural levees they have formed. And the other type are the man-made or artificial levees. So usually for flood mitigation, these are constructed parallel to the banks on both right and left banks of the rivers where you want to protect the adjacent areas. So the embankments or the levees, or in local we call them as bunds, they are constructed and they help us to remain the flood water within the channel and the area between the levees. So it is not spread in the adjacent area, and the area is protected from inundation. So this is mostly carried out to protect the property, or you can say in order to save the city or some towns which are near the banks of the rivers. So man-made levees, uh, in a simple way, you can just collect or you can just deposit the soil with the help of a bulldozer, and you can build up a levee, but these will not be very stable or strong, and they can easily be breached by the power of the water. But if you properly design them, which will include the compaction of that earth, the construction of the reinforced concrete walls, or other methods of solid construction, so it will be more uh, uh, safe, and it will provide more protection from river flooding to the areas which are behind them. But all these levees, which are man-made or artificial, they have the risk of failure due to the overtopping. If the height of the levees or the embankments is not sufficient, and if it is less than the highest flood level, then of course it will be overtopped. And of course, if it is not properly compacted or maintained, then breaching can occur, and the flood water can escape from these levees and inundate the surrounding area, and it will not perform the function for which it was meant to be. So have to be very properly designed, keeping in view the past floods, the past flood levels. So their height should be then accordingly be designed. So why should we construct these man-made levees or embankments? So you see the consequences if we don't have such types of artificial levees or man-made levees. They can be, you can say, in the absence of those levees, it can be harmful for the adjacent area. Like in the photograph, you see the road has been damaged. Likewise, if there is a town or city nearby, it can be inundated, or if you have your agricultural lands or some important installations, so those can have the damage. So in order to protect against such damages, we ourselves or artificially construct these levees, known as the embankments or bunds. So this was one of the features which you see in a floodplain, the natural or the artificial levees. Other features which you see in a floodplain are back swamps or Yazoo tributaries. So we will discuss them one by one. So these are the prominent features of a floodplain: the bag swamps and yazoo tributaries. So bag swamps, you see, is a marshy area which is formed in the shape of oval-shaped depressions, and where the water is not drained out, it is poorly drained. So it is type of a swamp created. जिस तरह की दलदल बन जाती है, there is excess soil moisture in that area, in that depression, and you will very commonly find swamps in a floodplain. And the other type of feature you will observe in a floodplain are the yazoo tributaries, which are the tributaries which fail to join the main river or main channel due to the formation of levees. So they are cut off from the main channel and they run parallel to the main channel. So these are actually its tributaries which uh, should join or dispose of in the main channel. But due to the formation of levees, either natural levees or maybe artificial levees, so they are unable to join the main channel and they run parallel to the main channel. So you see here the definition: poorly drained oval-shaped depressions which are locally formed. They are the swamp area. And the yazoo tributaries, these are the small tributary channels which have been prevented from joining the mainstream channel due to the formation of the levees which have been formed either naturally or man-made, and they then tend to flow parallel to the main channel. So flooding, it is a natural process which occurs along the river floodplains, and the flooding can be a result of heavy rainfall or due to the melting of snow in the springtime when there is increase in temperature. So flooding can occur. So floods, they are described by their recurrence interval or the return period. So we call a 100-year flood as the one which can occur on an average every 100 years. That is, its probability is 1 in 100. Within 100 years, in any 1 year, it can occur. So like the super flood of 210, its probability or time period, return period or recurrence interval was 500. That it has got the probability of 1 in 500. So due to the floods, erosion is caused as the velocity of the water is very high in the flood period, and also the volume of water is very high. So when these floods pass in an uninhabited floodplains, they are harmless because there is nothing to be damaged if there is no human intervention in those areas. But if you have some human interventions like cropping in the floodplains, or if you have some property built up area in floodplains, then it can be proved to be harmful. Otherwise, floods, they are harmless when there are no uh, human interventions in the floodplains. And also, their positive side is that they replenish the groundwater and they deposit the nutrients in the soil layers. So you see the land becomes very fertile. So beside harmful effects, especially in the uh, you can say areas where there is human property or human life or human interventions. But if there are nothing like that, it is just the natural floodplains, then it will be harmless and it will have positive effect. That is, it will recharge the groundwater and it will also add to the nutrients to the soil. This picture you see is the urban floods in 2010 of Hyderabad city, urban flooding, and more pictures of USA, the damages caused by flooding, riverine floods, and urban floods. So, floods, we can classify them in various types, like the riverine floods, the flash floods, the urban floods. So the flash floods, they are mostly occur in the local, and they suddenly start, and they have a very large volume of water, and they persist for short time or short duration, and they trigger due to the heavy thunderstorm, which result in a very large volume of water, which stays for a very short duration, but its impacts are very devastating. So in our DI Khan and DG Khan area, you see there are hill torrents or flash floods occurring, causing a lot of damage in those areas. So for controlling floods, we take some measures. The structural measures, we can construct some structures which can mitigate the dangers of flood waters and sedimentation to river cities. So there are many ways we can mitigate the flood effects. So you can see the controlling flood measures. So we can construct reservoirs on the upstream side, which can trap the water or retain water, and the surplus water can be stored in those reservoirs, and which can be released uh, at the time when there are low flows and there is requirement downstream. So one way to mitigate the effects of floods is the construction of reservoirs in order to store the surplus water. Second, we can construct these artificial levees parallel to the river banks on either side, the area of the areas which we want to protect from the flood, the right bank or the left bank, so that the flood water will remain within that channel and the area between the embankments, and it will not inundate the adjacent area. So second, structures, man-made structures can be the construction of artificial levees or embankments or bunds locally, as we call them. A third method can be to construct the flood walls. So this can also be constructed to protect the cities from flooding. So these are permanent structures which can be constructed. And another structural measure, are the construction of bypass channels. So they are used along a river to reduce the discharge in the main channel by diverting the water into the designated basins in the floodplain. In the figure, you can see the where which it is the flood water is diverted in the bypass channel, and then through the second where after the passage of flood it can again be uh, disposed of in the main channel. So floods can be controlled by construction of bypass channels as well. So these are some of the structural measures. Beside these structural measures, there are also non-structural measures, like the improvement of our early warning and forecasting, flood forecasting system. We can improve them. We can have efficient flood uh, forecasting models in order to predict the arrival of the flood peaks before time, so that timely warnings can be issued for evacuation. So these are all non-structural measures. So both structural and non-structural methods, they are adopted in order to mitigate the flood effects. Now coming to the rivers, the as we have studied that the rivers, they originate from the mountainous area where they cause erosion, and they cut their base and their banks in order to widen their channel. So you see an example of river Colorado in the Grand Canyon area. You see the river is carving its way in the Grand Canyon, which is all rocky area, very resistant material to erode, and river Colorado flows through this Grand Canyon. And then we have a picture of our river Indus in the zone where it is known as the incised river, where it is cutting its bed and the sides. So you can see the river Indus having a very narrow width, and due to the material is highly resistant, and it will take a number of years in order to deepen its channel to accommodate all the discharge of the main channel itself. So the river, it forms some principal channel patterns which we have discussed, like the meandering pattern, and very rare it follows a straight reach, or it forms a braiding pattern, or it forms the anastomosing uh, pattern, uh, which is illustrated in some of the rivers. So these types are the principal river channel patterns which various rivers exhibit. So these can occur within one river as well. For some part, it may flow in a straight reach. Some part, it will be exhibiting the meandering pattern, in some braiding, and in some anastomosing. So this is a picture of a braided river. So you see the channel splitting up into multiple channels flowing around the sandbars and then reuniting. And this is another uh, braided river in the Alaska, where you see the braiding pattern very clearly. You can see how it is splitting up, the splitting of channels flowing around the sandbars and then reuniting. Then the example of river Indus tributary river Nabra, that is in India. So it is basically a tributary of river Indus. So it is exhibiting the braiding pattern. Then another tributary of river Indus, Shyok River. So also showing the braiding pattern, very prominent. You can see the sandbars or the sediment deposits. So the channel splits due to those sandbars or the sand deposits, flows around it, and then reunites. Then an example of a anastomosing river. So where the river splits into multiple channels but does not flow around the sandbars. So this is the basic difference between a braiding pattern and an anastomosing pattern. So meandering pattern of the river Amazon in the South America. So you see the very visible meandering pattern of river Amazon, the zigzag path, then the meandering pattern of Mackenzie River of New Zealand. So very clear meanders of having very high amplitudes. So we have seen that the rivers in the depositional tract, they can have a variety of forms. So the principal variable which you will observe in the rivers while they are in the depositional tract, that whether they are flowing straight in a straight manner or they are following a sinus uh, pattern, that is a meandering pattern. Then another principal variable which you will observe is whether they are forming a single channel or they are splitting up into multiple channels, like in case of anastomosing uh, pattern, where the river splits up into multiple channels but does not flow around the sandbars. So basic principal variable being the presence or absence of the sandbars. So single channel or the multiple channels flowing around a sandbar or without a sandbar. So these are the principal variables which you will observe in a river while it is in the depositional tract. So straight channel, uh, we see that it is without bars, and this is the simplest bar, but it is very rare that the river flows in some reach in a straight path. So most of it will have a sinus path. Then a breading river we see contains the mid-channel bars that are covered at bank flow, bank full flow when the uh, water level is high in the river itself. So these sandbars, they are then buried underwater. So the braided river, it flows around the sandbars, but the anastomosing river, it flows without having channel bars or the sandbars. So both braiding and anastomosing river channels, they can be sinus. That is, they can have the zigzag path, and uh, the inside of the bends, especially the while they are forming the depositional bars, they will be called as the meanders. So in a braided river, when it has got a high proportion of sediment which is carried by rolling and saltation along the channel floor, so we have classified them as bed load rivers. So where the this type of sediment, that is the bed load, is deposited as bars of sand or gravel in the channel, the flow is split up and it gives the shape of the breeding form. So in the breeding river, the dominant sediment is the bed load, whereas in the uh, meandering rivers, you will see that the more dominant type of sediment is the suspended sediments. So bars in a braided river channel, uh, you can see them when the flow is in the low stage, but when there is bank full level in the river itself, they will be covered with the water and they will not be visible to the naked eye. So this you see a braiding river. Not only it's showing the braiding pattern, but also you see how it has moved laterally from right to left. So also the shifting. While it is exhibiting the braiding pattern, it is also shifting its path. Then in a meandering river, where the dominant sediment is the suspended sediments, so you see in a plan view, the Thalweg, that is the deepest part or in the channel, main channel itself, where the water all the times keep flowing, is not straight. So you will see at the bottom that the line of Thalweg, it is not straight and not parallel to the bank. So it is having or flowing a zigzag path. and you see that the bank which is closest to the thalweg, it has got relatively fast flowing water against it, so it will be eroding that bank, and where there will be you can say less velocity, it will be depositing. So meanders, they are going to develop by the erosion of the bank which is closest to this line of thalweg. So as the velocity at the uh, this part of the river bank will be higher and it will cause erosion. So meanders will be developing on those banks. So we have also seen that these meanders, their amplitudes keep on expanding, and their necks when meet each other. So this results in a cutoff and a oxbow lake that is formed, and the river adopts the shortest path. So this oxbow lake will remain for some time. Its water will either evaporate or it will infiltrate, and only the scars of that oxbow lake will remain after some time. So meandering river, mostly we have seen that they transport and deposit a mixture of suspended and bed load. So both they are carrying, but the dominant is the suspended load. So the coarsest material will be in the deepest part of the channel, and the finer material will be carried in the shallower part of the flow, and that will be deposited along the inner band of a meander loop, where due to friction it will reduce the flow velocity. So now coming to the behavior of rivers. So we have seen that the river exhibits different patterns while flowing from upstream toward downstream. So what causes these different types of behaviors to make the river form those different patterns? So the behavior of river is mainly affected by the silt laden flow, because the this water of the river itself is carrying a lot of silt with it. So due to the silt laden water, all these behavior of river is exhibited in different forms. So this makes the river beds to raise up, because there will be deposition on the river bed itself. So this is the chief cause of the behavior of rivers, that due to the deposition of silts on the bed, it will start raising the river bed, and then it will be behaving different patterns. So while the river flows from the origin point, that is from where it was starting, to the disposal point, which can be a sea or a ocean or another river body. So it will present various behaviors in the shape of sometimes following a bend, sometimes in shape of meanders, in cutoffs, then the delta formation, then the interlacing channel, etc. So these behaviors we will discuss them one by one. So first, coming to the straight reach, which is a very rare that a river flows in a straight reach. Usually, it will follow a Sanius path. So if you observe in a straight river, where the river is flowing straight in a river reach, if you observe its section, so you will see its section is of trough shape, and the highest velocity will be occurring in the midsection. If you see the velocity distribution curve, the highest velocity is in the mid. So as a consequence of this, you will see that the middle portion seems to be depressed, or the lower portion, as compared to the sides. So there are, you can say, due to the highest velocity flowing in the midsection, which is causing a transverse gradient from the sides toward the center. So you will see the water level raised at the banks and the water level lower in the center. So this is due to the high velocity flow taking place in the mid of the river section, which is flowing a straight path. So this is the behavior of a river when it is flowing in a straight beat, which is very uncommon. So you will see the transverse currents uh, flowing from the bank towards the center of the channel and lowering the middle portion and raising the water level near the banks. While if you observe a river while it is taking a bend, so you will see that it is characterized by scouring and erosion on the concave side, that is the outer side, and shoaling, that is it is uh, depositing sediments on the convex side, on the inner side. So the main characteristic features of the flow while it is negotiating a bend, you will first of all see that the flow is subjected to centrifugal forces as it is taking a bend. So due to the centrifugal forces, as a consequence, there will be a transverse slope of water surface from the inner bank towards the outer bank. And water, in order to keep its own level, that will tend to flow from convex side, that is from the inner side, to the concave side. So outer side की तरफ flow करेगा. But however, this movement is prevented along the water's surface by centrifugal forces. So counteracting that, centrifugal forces will come into force, and this will protect the water from flowing from inner to outer side. So the top water, that is water at the surface, it will dive in at the concave, that is the outer bank, and it will flow along the bottom, carrying therewith sand and silt to the convex or the inner bank, and where it is deposited due to the reduced velocity. So at the outer side, concave side, velocity is higher, so it will pick all the sediment, final sediment, sand and silt, velocity being higher, and it will deposit this on the inner side where the velocity is reduced. So the deposition occurs on the inner side of the bed. So when once a bend is established, so you see the flow, it tends to make its curvature larger. So while it is forming a bed, a well-formed bed, then it will be, then you'll see transforming into a mid-ring pattern. Where the curvature, it will grow more. So this you see the helical movement of water on a curved channel while it is negotiating a bend. So water from inner to outer tries to flow, but due to centrifugal forces, in order to keep the water at level, so it will try to stop it. So otherwise, you will see the tilted water level. So the sediments from the outer bank, they are eroded and they are deposited on the inner side. So this is due to the helical movement of water while it is negotiating a bend. This is another picture showing the same procedure scouring on the concave or outer edge, and silting or deposition on the convex or inner side. Then coming to meandering. So alluvial rivers, as we have seen, that they are mainly characterized by their meandering tendency. So the term meandering we use mainly for those channels which have a tortuous course with bends of either regular or irregular shape, and the curvatures may be small or large. But this term meandering, it usually is applied only to the letter S channel pattern, where you see the English alphabet S channel pattern that is free to shift. So if it is flowing naturally and it is not prompted to change its path, so then with the passage of time, it will also literally shift its course as well. So a meandering river on alluvial plain, it flows in consecutive curves of reverse orders. So you will see one amplitude in clockwise and other in the anti-clockwise uh, uh, section. So you see there will be a pair clockwise and anti-clockwise amplitudes. So meandering in a river will consist of two consecutive loops, one which will be flowing in a clockwise direction and the other in the anti-clockwise direction. So the mechanics of meandering is a transfer process where we have seen that the material it erodes from the outer bed, that is the concave side, and it deposits on the inner or the convex side. So this is the main process which is taking place in while a river is exhibiting a meandering pattern. So this meanders keeps on uh, increasing their amplitude, and a very prominent or distinct meanders they are formed while the river is flowing in the alluvial tract. So here you can see the illustration of formation of meanders. Erosion taking place at the concave or the outer bend, and the deposition taking place on the inner or the convex side. So the inner portion is known as the point bar, and the outer is known as the cutoff uh, point. So inner portion will have the depositional characteristics because the sediments are deposited there, and at the convex or outer side, the sediments they are eroded. So meander development you can see in this figure from stage 1 to stage 5 how the meander develops. So stage 1 you see the small bends, but in stage 2 you see more bends taking shape of meanders with smaller amplitudes. But in stage 4 you see very prominent amplitude of the meanders, and 5 you see that the amplitude has grown larger and the neck will be formed, and the river will then take the shortest path, a cutoff will take place, and a oxbow lake that will be formed. So all this process has also been simulated at lab scale. So in a area where the sand was spread at the floor and a channel was formed within the sand bed, and different discharges were allowed to flow in this channel. So what was observed that how these bends are formed. So you see the channel was straight initially, but with the variation in discharge and also the transporting of sediments, especially the suspended load. So you see beds or the meanders, they have started taking forms. So here you see more prominent amplitudes of the meanders, while in the initial stage this was just a straight channel, but how it has resulted into very prominent meanders. So these meanders, they expand, so they result in expansion, that they move laterally. They are also translated, they shift from one place to other. Rotation is also take place, that rotation is carried out in these meander process, and there is also change in the wavelength of these meanders. So four further processes take place in the meandering process. The expansion of meanders, the amplitude is grown or expanded, it is translated, it shifts, then it rotates, and also there is change in the wavelength. Now coming to what are the causes of meandering? Why a river meanders? So, as we discussed initially, that the chief uh, factor which makes the river meander is the silt-laden flow of the rivers itself. So, due to the sediments which is carried along with the river water, that makes different behaviors which results in different patterns of the river flows. So the main causes of meandering can be the local disturbances such as the variable bank material or obstruction. If there is any changes in the bank material itself, or if there is some obstruction, so that will uh, cause the river to meander. Another cause can be due to the excessive energy of the streams, uh, that is especially during the bankful flows in the monsoon period when there is lot of rainfall and the rivers, they are flowing at the bankful levels, having a lot of energy. So this causes the river to meander. Then due to the excessive bank erosion, the river meanders, and also one of the cause of meandering can be the transverse oscillation, which will result in the meandering. So the case of the main causes can be attributed to any of these factors which we have discussed, but the main or the primary cause, you can say, is the excess of total sediment charge, which is associated with excessive turbulence during floods. In the flood period, there is a lot of sediment carried along the flood water. So this is the primary cause of making the river to meander. So the silt charge in excess of the capacity of the river water. So as it is more than the required for the stability trends of a river, so the river itself tries to build a steeper slope by depositing the charge on the bed. So the excess silt is deposited on the bed, and due to that, steeper slopes they are formed, and due to the increase in slope, it tends to increase the width of the river channels, If the banks, they are not resistant, if they are not of alluvial material, so more bed erosion will take place, and the increase in, you can say, slope will tend to make the width of the river more wider. So then river will also try to literally shift from one side to the other side, and it will be eroding the outer side, and it will be depositing material or the sediments on the inner side. So the factors which govern the meandering pattern, they will have impact of different factors, that why some rivers they exhibit smaller or small amplitude meanders, while other rivers you see very prominent or very high amplitude, large amplitude meanders. So what are the factors which govern this meandering patterns? So one of the factors are the valley slope. So meander, you will see that they occur downstream of ridges where the silt charge is picked up in the upper side of the river. So at the downstream side, the slope changes from steep to flat, and it is unable to carry that charge, silt charge. So that means the deposition will take place. So whereas where the valley slope is steeper, as in the upper part of the alluvial valley, the meander length is longer in proportion to the river's width, and the bends they will have longer radii of curvature. So very large curvature meanders, and their crossovers consist of relatively long and shallow ridges. So where the valley slope it flattens, it is almost flat, as we observe in the downstream side of the alluvial valley. So these curvature tends to increase, and the meandering patterns increase in size. So you will see more number of meanders where the valley slope keeps on flattening, and less there is less slope. Then also the meandering pattern depends on the bank full discharge. So more the bank full discharge, that is more the discharge. So it means more visible or more prominent the meandering pattern will be. And another factor uh, which is responsible for this meandering pattern are the bed loads. So increase in bed load means there will be large meanders and a wider shallow channel. Uh, when the bed load will decrease, it will result in narrower and deeper channel with less styrene course on a lighter hydraulic gradient. And the last factor which makes impact on the pattern, meandering pattern, is the bed and side resistance. So if there is gravel and border bed, you will see that no definite meander pattern will be observed, because uh, they will have, you can say, material more resistance. So meandering will not be possible. So coming to the classification of meanders, so we can classify these meanders as they have got different shapes. So the broad classification is carried out in the form of either they are regular or irregular in shape, or we can classify them as simple or compound meanders. So regular meanders, as you can see in the figure, the regular meanders, we define those which have a train of beds having same curvature and frequency. अगर आप देखें फर्स्ट फिगर में, so same curvature and frequency, so we say that the pattern is being repeated as the curvature frequency remains same, so we classify them as regular meanders. But in the second figure, where you see the irregular meanders which are deformed in shape and they vary in amplitude and frequency. So some are smaller meanders, some are bigger, and their amplitude and frequency is also not the same. So those we classify them as irregular meanders. So this irregularity may be due to the variation in the discharge itself, as there can be addition of flow from the tributaries, or there can be branching out, the water flowing out of the main channel. So that may result on the formation of the meandering pattern, and they form irregular uh, uh, meanders which doesn't have the same curvature and frequency. If the discharge remains constant and there are no addition or subtraction from the main channel itself, then it will exhibit the same curvature and frequency meanders, and those we call them as regular meanders. But if the discharge changes, then it may result in the irregular meander formation. And sometimes due to the, you can say, non-homogeneity of the strata in which the channel is carved, that is, if the river encounters a rock outcrop or there is a stiff line deposit or clay formation, a weir, a barrage, a spur or guards. So there also you will see the irregular meander, as I will show you in the next figure. Here you see that the outer bend, there is a outer crop which has got a material resistant material. So that's why you see it will not be able to have formation of regular pattern. So here you will see the deformed type of meanders. So that's why you will see, due to this obstruction, deformed meanders are formed and they will not be having the same curvature and frequency. So those will be irregular. Then we classify the meanders as simple meanders. So simple meanders, that have those meanders which have got the bends of one dominant amplitude and frequency. So I will go back to the figure. So here you see simple meander. So one dominant curvature and frequency. So those will be termed as the simple meander. But here in the compound meander, you will see variation in the curvature and the frequency. So the amplitude varies and the frequency varies. So those will be classified as the compound meanders. So this can be due to the feature of the river which has got more than one dominant discharge. So this can result in formation of compound meanders. Now coming to the meander parameters. So meanders, as we have defined, that they will consist of two conjective loops. So one loop will be following the clockwise direction and one flowing in the opposite direction, that is anti-clockwise. So a meander, it will consist of two consecutive loops, one flowing clockwise, so one you see clockwise, and the other anti-clockwise, जो बिल्कुल opposite direction में होगा. So in figure 8.8 at the bottom, you see the clockwise and the anti-clockwise direction. दो आपको consecutive loops नजर आएंगे. Then what is meander belt? So meander belt we define as the distance between lines drawn tangential to the extreme limits of successfully fully developed meanders. So meander belt हम उसको कहेंगे कि अगर आप ये जो कर्वेचर है इससे टेंजेंशियल पॉइंट से आप लाइन ड्रॉ करें this and at the bottom, so the distance between these two tangential lines, they are known as the meander belt. यानी ये जो इसका कर्वेचर है यहाँ से आपने टेंजेंशियली लाइन ड्रॉ की है और ये बॉटम से जो कर्व से यहाँ से ड्रॉ की है, तो इन दोनों के दरमियान जो डिस्टेंस है that is known as the meander belt NB. And meander length is the distance between these two highest points. जो एक आपका लूप में नजर आ रहा है बॉटम पर और जो दूसरे के में, तो दोनों के दरमियान जो डिस्टेंस है that is known as the meander length. So technically, the air distance along a meandering type river measured from the tangential point of one curve to the tangential point of the next similar curve. जो आपने देखा कि दोनों कर्व्स के दरमियान जो डिस्टेंस है वो meander length है. Then meander ratio, so it is the ratio of meander width to meander length. So अगर इन दोनों की हम meander width और meander length की रेशो ले लें तो वो मेंडर रेशो कहलाएगी. टॉरिसिटी रेशो ऑफ द लेंथ ऑफ रिवर चैनल जो कि along द रिवर चैनल है टू द एक्सियल लेंथ जो कि स्ट्रेट है. सो एक्सियल लेंथ और उसके दरमियान जो रेशो होगी वो कहलाएगी टॉरिसिटी. और क्रॉस ओवर्स द शॉर्ट स्ट्रेट रीच ऑफ द रिवर connecting two consecutive clockwise and anti-clockwise loops. So this will be classified as the crossover. So ये आपको figure में दिखाता हूँ. So here you see the change in curvature. So एक से ये जब दूसरे में form हो रहा है तो ये short distance where this is crossover. That now it is changing into the other. So change in curvature is the crossover. एंड द इफेक्टिव विड्थ ये जो रिवर की आपकी ये बन जाती है दो पॉइंट्स के दरमियान. सो दिस इज द इफेक्टिव विड्थ. सो देन relationship has been established by a researcher known as Inglis based on the observations of various rivers, especially rivers of subcontinent, and by analyzing the data of these rivers, he established some empirical relationships between the parameters of a meander. So, the meander belt we see in floodplains is 6.06 times of the effective width of the river. So, if you just measure the effective width, अगर आप सिर्फ उसकी effective width measure कर लें और उसको multiply कर लें 6.06 से, so you can have the meander belt. So वहाँ से आप जो है meander length होंगे, ML length, not MB. So that can be determined just from this formula or empirical relationship. And if this river is incised river, जो कि upper reaches में होता है आपका, when it is cutting off its base, so वहाँ पर अगर आपने meander की length निकालनी है, so you multiply the effective width by 11.45. So you get the meander length. So instead of actually measuring the मेंडल लेंथ आप इन फार्मूलों से इफेक्टिव विड्थ ऑफ रिवर जो है वो मालूम करना है, W की वैल्यू, and multiply by this constants, so you get the meandre length. Likewise, meandre belt 17.4 times of effective width. So इस तरह में ये देखें various relationships establish हुए हैं. Then even if you don't have the effective width, if you have the discharge on the discharge of that river, so वहाँ से भी meandre length निकाल सकते हैं. Like in a floodplain river, the meandre length is 53.61 times discharge raised to power 1.5. So सिर्फ discharge measure किया हुआ तो आप वहाँ से meandre length, meandre width निकाल सकते हैं, meandre length और meandre belt. और अगर आपने width निकालनी हो तो with the help of discharge formula वो भी निकाली जा सकती है. बॉटम पर अगर आप देखें, it is 8.84 times q raised to power ये क्या 0.5. सो ये आप डिस्चार्ज से मेजर कर लें तो वहाँ से आपको इफेक्टिव विड्थ आ जाएगी और आप बाकी चीज़ें ऑटोमेटिकली मेंडर लेंथ, मेंडर बेल्ट ये आप निकाल सकते हैं. एंड लाइकवाइज उत्तर प्रदेश इरिगेशन रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट ने और ये रिलेशनशिप स्टैब्लिश की है. दीज आर एम्पिरिकल relationships established on the basis of analyzing large data of subcontinent rivers. So meandre length is 14.36 x raised to power c some exponent q raised to power some exponent. और likewise meandre belt का भी formula दिया हुआ है. So in this formula you need the value of x, which is the silt charge, q is the discharge in q6, और जो आपके ml और mb है वो meandre length और meandre belt है. तो यहाँ से भी अगर आपको सिल्ट चार्ज और डिस्चार्ज पता है तो ये भी यहाँ से निकाला जा सकता है व्हाट इज द मेंडर लेंथ एंड व्हाट इज द मेंडर बेल्ट. तो लाइकवाइज मेंडर लेंथ डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज रिलेशनशिप भी इस्टेब्लिश हुआ हुआ. सो इन नेचुरल स्ट्रीम द डिस्चार्ज विच डिटरमिन्स मेंडर लेंथ एंड बेल्ट मे बी टर्म्ड एज डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज. और जो डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज है मोस्टली इट कॉरस्पॉन्ड्स टू दी बेंटफुल स्टेज. जब रिवर इज फ्लोइंग एट दी फुल लेवल, जब वो बेंटफुल स्टेज में हो तो मोस्टली तो जो डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज है वो आपका उसी वक्त निकलाता है जब वो बेंटफुल स्टेज पर वो कर रहा हो. लेकिन मोस्टली तो ये हम एस्टेब्लिश कर लेते हैं कि यही डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज है. लेकिन कुछ रिवर्स के अंदर जो डोमिनेंट डिस्चार्ज है दैट वेरीज फ्रॉम हाफ टू 2/3 of the maximum discharge. So we can have some relationship corresponding to this dominant discharge as well. ये मैंने next में दिया हुआ होगा आपको. ml is equal to 65.8 q dominant raised to power 0.5, and assuming that q dominant is 2/3 of the maximum discharge. So this another relationship has been established between the meandre length and the dominant discharge. So यहाँ से भी आपको meandre length वो आपको determine हो सकती है. Now coming to another process, cutoff. So cutoffs, we have seen that while the river is exhibiting the meandering pattern, and when the two necks of the meander they come across each other, the distance कम होता जाता है because both are the concave sides of the meander and they keep on eroding, and one day they are going to meet. ये जो upper portion आपको नजर आ रहा है, and you will see that the river will start flowing in the shortest distance and this part will be cut off. ये यहाँ से कट ऑफ हो जाएगा और आपकी ऑक्सबो लेक फॉर्म हो जाएगी. So cutoff is actually the cutoff from the main channel itself. ये जब शॉर्टेस्ट रूट रिवर इख्तियार कर लेते हैं और जो आपका पोर्शन ऑफ द मेंडर है वो मेन चैनल से कट ऑफ हो जाती है और ऑक्सबो लेक फॉर्म हो जाती है. So it is defined as the process by which an alluvial river flowing along curves or bends abdomens a particular bend and establishes its main flow along comparatively straighter and shorter channel. So क्योंकि ये shortest path इसका available है, क्योंकि ये दो नेक्स जब ज्वाइन कर देंगी तो ये स्ट्रेट पाथ में यहाँ फ्लो कर जाएगा और ये जो यू टाइप आपका मेंडर है ये इससे कट ऑफ हो जाएगा मेन चैनल से, एंड दिस विल फॉर्म ए ऑक्सबो लेक. So cut off ratio we define as the ratio of the length of arc to chord of a meander at which the cutoff generally takes place. So using this cutoff ratio, we can also predict the occurrence of cutoff. So we say that the cutoff will occur when the cutoff ratio L over ML, that is length of workout channel to the chord, is 1.7 to 3 or more. अगर ये रेशियो जो है कट ऑफ रेशियो 1.7 से 3 या इससे ज़्यादा होगी तो कट ऑफ विल अकर. So you can forecast or predict the formation of a cutoff. Especially for the Punjab province, the cutoff ratio is considered as 1.7. अगर ये cutoff ratio 1.7 हो जाए, so you can predict that a cutoff will be formed off and a oxbow lake will be formed. While for the Sindh province, it is little more. The cutoff ratio जो है वो ज़्यादा है. It is more than 2. So if the cutoff ratio is more than 2, then we can forecast that cutoff will be formed and Oxbow Lake will be occurring there. So likewise, different you can say relationships have been established. So what are the effects of cutoff once a cutoff is developed? So with the establishment of a cutoff bank, the banks they start caving. New channels are formed. Some old channels they get silted up until at last, probably during low stage, are temporarily stability established for a couple of months. So this is the main effect of cutoff, that the bank they start caving, that the erosion takes place, and the new channels they are formed, and the old channels they will get silted up. So the action of cutoff is similar to that of channel improvement for stage reduction of flood. So the cutoffs can also be formed naturally as well as artificially. So ये जो मेंडरिंग प्रोसेस है या प्रोसेस है इसको हम आर्टिफिशियली भी कट ऑफ कर सकते हैं बाय डेवलपिंग ए man-made cutoff and straighten, or you can say for the channel improvement to straighten the channel, this can artificial cutoff can be formed as well. So cutoff also causes local changes in the direction of current, so which will mainly result in the erosion of the banks itself. So bank erosion will start once the cutoffs are formed. So this is the main effect of cutoff. So now once a cutoff is formed, the river follows a straight path, then this will also have effect on the you can say arrival of the flood waves or flood peaks, because now the river is flowing in a shortest path and the arrival time will decrease. So this will also have effect on the arrival of flood peak as well. as you have shortened the distance, and as if it was a meander, the flood peak has to travel that meander, and it would have taken longer for peak to rise. But due to the formation of the cutoff, the arrival of peak will be sooner, and it will give you less time for evacuation or for the flood warning. So this is another effect of cutoff. Now coming to the last topic of this river mechanics are the effect of dam on river regime. So when we construct some obstruction across a river, like a reservoir is developed or a dam is constructed across the river, then what happens? Some changes take place both on the upstream and the downstream side. So on the upstream side, if you have constructed a dam, then on the upstream side, what will happen is that aggradation will start taking place. There will be deposition of sediments on the upstream side due to the obstruction or the obstacle created in the path of the river. So, if you see the longitudinal section at the bottom of a reservoir, you will see the top set, the bed will have coarser material like boulders, gravels. They will start depositing at the top set, and the coarser material will be at the top set at the fore set, and the finer material, it will start getting deposited downstream at the bottom set bed, and this will start decreasing the capacity of the reservoir. So all the coarser material will deposit at the start of the reservoir, known as the top set bed and the fore set. So यहाँ पर जितना भी coarser material है, heavy material है, or bed load, all will deposit it at the start of the reservoir, and the finer will travel and will deposit downstream. So this will start decreasing the capacity of the reservoir itself. So in the reservoir, up to the crest level, this is the full reservoir level, and above that is the surcharge level or surcharge storage, and this is the live storage. Above live storage is above your uh, outlet and the full reservoir level, and below the live storage is the dead storage, because below the outlet, you cannot make use of this water stored in the dead storage. So when you construct a dam across a river, first of all, aggradation starts at the upstream level. All the heavy material starts depositing at the top, फाइनल उससे जो कम कोर्सर है वो उसके बाद फोर सेट में, और बॉटम पे जो है आपका all the final material, it will start depositing, and it will, with the passage of time, start decreasing the capacity of the reservoir itself, like we are facing in case of Tirbela and Mangla Dam and Varsak Dam, which is already full of sediments, and it is just run of the river. So likewise, there is a lot of problem of sedimentation in both our reservoirs of Tirbela and Mangla as well. Then what happens at the downstream level? So at the downstream below a reservoir, degradation starts, because almost all the sediment, they have settled down upstream. Like a coarser, medium, and finer, all have deposited. So water generally is clear at the downstream side, and this clear water has got more erosive power. So at the downstream side, this silt-free water or clear water will start eroding, and mostly the effects of this degradation will be the lowering of flood levels, damage to foundational structures, and materially affecting the functioning of dissipation devices such as stilling basins, apron with blocks, bucket, etc., due to reduced tailwater levels. So, degradation on the upstream side and degradation on the downstream side. So, also lowering of water table will be resultant in the downstream side because you are storing water. At the upstream side, less water is being released at the downstream side. So the water table in the area will also be affected, and that will be declining with the passage of time. So this is the main effect of a construction of a dam across a river. And the third effect is the reservoir-induced seismicity. That is, when you fill the reservoir, if you fill it very in a fashion where the filling rate is very high, then the extra load will make the tectonic plates to slide, and seismic activities can occur, earthquakes can occur, which can damage your structure of the dam itself. So reservoirs have to be filled with a predetermined rate of filling. So SOPs have been developed that every year uh, before monsoon, these are uh, reservoirs when we have low flows in them, and we have to fill them. So by the 15th August or 30th August, we have to fill these reservoirs, and we don't suddenly fill those reservoirs. So there is a filling rate already specified, and gradually we fill the reservoirs. Otherwise, they can trigger tremors in the area and cause structural damage. So as you are putting more weight on the tectonic plates underneath, and this may cause sliding of tectonic plates, resulting in the seismic activity in the area. So you have to be very careful while filling the reservoirs. So every year, WAPDA has issued SOPs how to fill these reservoirs slowly with a predetermined fixed rate of filling. So this was the end of this topic. So any query regarding this topic?
सर मुझे रीजन समझ नहीं आया, रेजर्वॉयर इंड्यूस्ड सिस्मिक कैसे ये एक्टिविटी सिस्मिक इंड्यूस होती है, काइंडली रिपीट।
हाँ जी, इसका ये है ना कि जब आप इसको फिल कर रहे हैं, यू आर पुटिंग एक्स्ट्रा वेट ऑफ वाटर ऑन दी टेक्टोनिक प्लेट्स। अंडर ग्राउंड जो है वो प्लेट्स हैं, जब उनके ऊपर वेट ज़्यादा पड़ेगा तो दे कैन स्लाइड अगेंस्ट ईच अदर। और जब आपको पता है कि ये अर्थक्वेक आते हैं या साइज्मिक एक्टिविटी होती है, सो दैट इज ड्यू टू द स्लाइडिंग ऑफ दीज टेक्टोनिक प्लेट्स। सो अगर इन पर वेट आप बढ़ा देंगे तो ये स्लाइड कर सकती हैं और साइज्मिक एक्टिविटी स्टार्ट हो सकती है। लेकिन अगर आप इनको स्लोली फिल करेंगे रेजर्वायर्स को, रेजर्वायर्स में आपको पता है बहुत ज़्यादा स्टोरेज है, एक जगह आप वेट पुट कर रहे हैं। तो यू माइट हैव हर्ड दैट द थ्री गॉर्जेस डैम जो चाइना में बना है, उसने जो अर्थ रोटेशन है वो फ्रैक्शन ऑफ ए सेकंड अफेक्ट की है ना, क्योंकि यू हैव accumulated a large amount of weight on a particular point. So likewise, जब आप किसी भी reservoir को suddenly fill करते हैं तो you put suddenly weight over the plates और ये plates में sliding हो सकती है, इसकी वजह से जो है ये seismic activity हो सकती है। तो इसीलिए वापडा ने SOPs दिए हुए, ये आपको 30 अगस्त तक फिल करने इस रेट से, इससे ज़्यादा हम एक्सीड नहीं कर सकते, अदरवाइज seismic एक्टिविटीज अगर हो सकती है और स्ट्रक्चरल डैमेजेस कॉज हो सकते हैं. So before the end of monsoon, these reservoirs have to be filled, but very carefully with a predetermined filling rates. तो इस वजह से जो है इसको हमें फॉलो करना पड़ता है. अगर सडनली फिल करेंगे, आप वेट ज़्यादा पुट करेंगे और स्लाइडिंग अकर हो सकती है अंडरनीथ जो कि आपकी टेक्टोनिक प्लेट्स हैं, क्योंकि डिफरेंट जियोलॉजिकल लेयर्स हैं. सो वो प्लेट्स अगर स्लाइड करते हैं वेट की वजह से, तो उसी की वजह से आपका जो है ये अर्थक्वेक एक्टिविटीज अकर होती है. तो क्लियर हो गया आपको ये पॉइंट?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Any more?
Excuse me, sir.
Mani?
Sir, my question is regarding to previous slides. There were some relationships in order to find the length from the dominant discharge. Sir, what is the reason that the ratios for the incised river were more than the ratios for the rivers in floodplains?
In the incised river and the floodplain, the most dominant difference is the width. As you have seen, in the incised river, the rivers have narrow widths. आपको देखा है ना कि अपस्ट्रीम पर जो इंसाइज रिवर्स की विड्थ है वो बहुत कम होती है, क्योंकि रेजिस्टेंट मटेरियल में वो फ्लो कर रहा होता है. लेकिन जब वही रिवर फ्लो करता है प्लेन्स के अंदर, तो उसकी विड्थ बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाती है. और इंडस की मैंने आपको एग्जांपल दी थी. अगर आप देखें इसको जो नॉर्दर्न एरिया में गिलगित बल्तिस्तान वगैरह उस एरिया में देखें, या जब फर्स्ट एंटर हो रहा है पाकिस्तान में, और फिर इसको आप देखें पंजाब के अंदर प्लेन्स के अंदर, तो वाइड डिफरेंस है विड्थ के अंदर. तो उसकी वजह से जो रिलेशनशिप स्टैब्लिश हुए हैं वो दोनों पे फर्क आएंगे, क्योंकि ये आपने देखा है कि वो डब्ल्यू के पर अफेक्ट कर रहे हैं, और लाइकवाइज क्यू से वो रिलेटेड है. सो डिस्चार्ज भी जो है वो अपस्ट्रीम और डाउनस्ट्रीम में बहुत फर्क आ जाता है. डाउनस्ट्रीम में और ट्रिब्यूटरीज ऐड हो जाती हैं, वॉर डिस्चार्ज. सो डेट मीन्स जो इंसाइज रिवर और प्लेन रिवर्स, इनके दरमियान जो क्यू का भी फर्क है और डब्ल्यू का भी फर्क है. तो इस वजह से इनके आपने कॉन्स्टेंट्स हैं वो भी दोनों के फर्क रखे गए हैं. तो दे कैन नॉट बी सेम. तो क्लियर हो गया ये पॉइंट?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Okay.
हाँ, क्योंकि ऑब्जर्वेशन है ना डिफरेंट स्टेजेस में देखी गई हैं. सो अपस्ट्रीम देखा और फिर डाउनस्ट्रीम. तो उसी रिवर में अगर आपने मेंडर लेंथ अपस्ट्रीम निकालनी है, तो वो इसका साइज रिवर है, तो वहाँ पर क्यू आपका क्यू भी कम है और अब उसमें जो डब्ल्यू है वो भी कम है. लेकिन जब आप नीचे आ जाते हैं तो ये दोनों चीज़ें इंक्रीज हो जाती हैं, तो वो फिर एक नया रिलेशनशिप देना पड़ा. तो अगर तो डब्ल्यू और क्यू सेम रहें तो फिर तो ये कोई फर्क नहीं होना चाहिए था. लेकिन क्यू और डब्ल्यू वेरी करते हैं, तो ये रिलेशनशिप भी दोनों के लिए फिर अलग अलग निकालने पड़ेंगे.
Okay, sir.
हाँ उजैर, आपका कोई उजैर, यू हैव गॉट सम पॉइंट? So okay, we have covered now up to now 5 lectures, that is up to river mechanics. So our next topic will be river hydraulics. So river hydraulics will be taught by our another colleague, Madam Amara Mubin. So from next week, she will be taking maybe 2 or 3 lectures to cover this topic. And after that, again, then I will start with the river survey after she had finished the topic of river hydraulics. So next time, same time, Pari, 5 o'clock, she will be taking your class. And for 2 or 3 lectures, she will be giving you lecture on the topic of river hydraulics. So you have already studied advanced open channel hydraulics, and you are in this term studying computational hydraulics. So those students will be having more benefit if you have already studied. Otherwise, you will be starting from the basic things. So if you haven't not studied advanced open channel or the computational, still you will be able to understand, because it will be basically starting from the undergrad courses of fluid mechanics. So types of flows, you will be starting from there, so that everyone understands the basic, and then she will go on the advanced topic. So next week से 2-3 लेक्चर वो लेंगे, और उसके बाद अगेन रिमेनिंग पोर्शन आई विल बी टेकिंग. So attendance आप इसी के ऊपर लगा लें, because still on CMS we don't have your names on CMS, and result has been announced now. I hope everybody has seen their result